Welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. We've got an interesting show for you. We're going to give you all the statistics and all the background information, and hopefully a bunch of pictures from both the Little Trevor's Yacht Club's You Got a Regatta, which was last weekend. Talk a little bit about that race, and then we are finishing up as we speak the Transperior 2025 Transperior, as you can see behind me. Joel Rummings was the first boat across at Catapult. He ended up in third position on the handicap, but he was the first one to come across the lake. A rather slow race, but one nevertheless. We're going to cover both the You Got a Regatta, kind of talk a little bit about the winners. He's also got, I think, a really pretty good show. One of the things that we've done on the show, I think, pretty well is we've done a good job of raising money for the Detroit Community Sailing Center, Challenge to Win. So we're going to have a quick conversation with Harry Jones, who is their executive director. They've got over 100 kids in the program, but they're finding a financial squeeze at the end of the sailing season here. They're somewhere between $12,000 and $15,000 short, and we're hoping that we can encourage you to give them a helping hand. It is a great program. Harry will be up in a couple seconds talking about that, and we'll let him do that right now. Welcome back. We're talking with our favorite junior sailing director, Harry Jones, who is a part of the Detroit Community Sailing Center, Challenge to Win. And Harry, you're in the middle of a fundraising effort to make sure we get more kids on the water. And we've been, I think, pretty supportive of the program. I love the program to death. So how can we help?
Yeah, great. I really appreciate the support you've been given over the years. It's been a tremendous help just to get the word out that we exist and to let people know that, because of how we're organized to serve underserved youth and make it affordable, we've got to raise a tremendous amount of money in order to cover costs. Sailing, as you know, can get quite expensive, particularly with little kids banging boats in the docks and the like. This year was a particularly interesting year for us. It presented a unique challenge that we haven't had in the past, and it's in part by good news and bad news. The good news is we're growing. When you grow, your expenses go up. The bad news is our revenue didn't follow that chart going upward. It went down. We lost some pretty significant people that had been donating to us. And so and the insurance has been increasing for everyone. Our rent at the boathouse went up tremendously. And just the general maintenance cost and materials for maintenance. If it wasn't for the wonderful volunteers that we have, we would certainly have been done under a long time ago. So with those increased costs, we looked at how are we going to make ends meet by the end of the year and realized we've got to do something. And so that was the urgent need to raise some money and to whatever extent people could pitch in, a dime to a lot more, we certainly appreciate it.
Hey, what's the shortfall for the moment for this year's budget?
Yeah, we're somewhere in the neighborhood between, depending on what happens, between 10 and 15 grand.
How many kids through the program this year?
Over 100.
Okay.
And just so that you understand the math, those 100 slots are basically 2-week learn to sail slots. We charge $100 for that. $100 for 100 people. You do the math. If our expenses, you can see where we have to raise a tremendous amount of money just to keep the lights on.
Yeah. No, I get that. Last year we were fortunate enough to do a whole segment on some of your kids painting a boat they built, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world. But the thing that got me the most, Harry, and that was probably 2 or 3 years ago, watching kids who've never swum before get out of the water before they ever got the boat because they learned how to swim.
Right.
And it's for you and I, it's one of those things that's just sort of second nature, right?
Exactly.
To watch a 9, 10, 11-year-old come out of the water with a smile on their face because they're learning to swim, a life skill that we'll always have.
Right.
And think of all the things that you might not do because you might be afraid of the water. You might not want to go near the water. You might not be a part of it.
And the planet we live on has got a lot of water, right?
Right. And Michigan does.
Yeah, no, that's my point. But to see the smiles on the faces of those darn kids,
Right. And here, I got to hand it to the Detroit Y.
yeah,
They have a Detroit Swims program, and we got connected through them. And they created a special program for us to do water safety right on the docks where we teach sailing. Most of their programs are in pools. Most kids learn to swim in a swimming pool. In a river where you can't see the bottom,
right.
completely different story. And they
Yeah.
do a wonderful job to the extent that we can't stop the young folks from capsizing their boats so that they can go for an accidental swim.
And Harry, if you guys come up short, there's a lot of real difficult choices for the organization. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, it's a real fair question, and it's one that's been highlighted by the predicament that we're in terms of what we know we owe and have to pay by the end of the year.
We caught you for the first time 5 years ago, and I think you had 35 or 40 kids in the program. And I know you
Mhm.
guys have gone into, three-figure numbers of those kids getting to that opportunity. So, number one, if you have an opportunity, Harry's going to send us a link, and that'll be posted right below Harry's face. Get on the link. I'm going to be the first guy on it for $100 and make sure that that gets sent in today. So I'm pleading for those who watch the show, make sure that you guys help us out because this is arguably the best program in the Great Lakes. I just think it is fabulous to help kids learn how to swim and learn how to sail. And there's no other way around it. I'm not a racer, man, but I know as a coach, I know what this means to kids.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that a whole lot, Greg.
Yeah. We'll get this. If you guys watch the show, make sure you guys jump. There's been a number of times when we have gotten, the show has jumped some money towards the program. And
Yes, it
I don't,
has.
I don't want to sound like Jerry Lewis, but if you don't want me to sing, just guys help out because this is, like I said, this is a first class dude, and this is one of the best programs in the Great Lakes. So if you can help, help. And Harry, I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate you doing this tremendously because no question we certainly need it. So.
I'm Naheem Hines. I support the Muscular Dystrophy Association because they help my mom and kids like Ethan.
Thanks to the Muscular Dystrophy Association and people like you, I have more hope than ever before.
Join us and learn more at mda.org today.
We just wanted to thank Harry for taking a couple seconds out. There is a bit of a shortfall at the Community Sailing Center, and we want to be able to give them a hand. So if you can reach into your pocket and give Harry and the kids at the Detroit Community Sailing Center some help, it would be much appreciated. I just sent in my first $100, and hopefully you will follow suit and get them on track for next year's expenses have gotten more difficult to cover. That being the case, we also on the show, Wally Cross is going to talk to us a little bit about the mental aspect of sailing. I think that's something that is unique and different, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk. It's all you get your boat ready, you do all the work, you practice, but sometimes you don't think about the brain stem and all the stuff that goes in it. And as a coach, I can tell you that the thought process is as important as anything you do on the practice field or certainly on the boat while you're practicing for races. I think that's very important. And then we're going to finish with what might be my most enjoyable interview. I've known Phoebe Wall-Howard for a while. Her husband was the former Commodore at the Port Huron Yacht Club, and she was a former Detroit Free Press automotive writer, and she also covered sailing. She's left the Free Press, now works as a contributing editor for the Detroit News, a former Missouri graduate. If you know anything about journalism schools, I can tell you it's a first-class school. She has been a stellar journalist covering the White House, wars, the automotive industry, all kinds of things. But she had really taken off this year with volume and quality as it relates to sailing by covering anything and everything on Substack. And I've been a chance to read with her. We're going to catch up with her. And we're going to talk about sailing and why a program like this or a program or writing like hers has sort of taken off. I think sailing does a poor job of promoting itself. And I can tell you that we've talked to the best sailors in the world, and I'm a guy with a computer in the middle of nowhere. And we've been to Barcelona and a number of other places. And it's one of those things that we're trying to get the message back to you that we want to promote the sport that we love as much. And I think we'll give you some insight from that. But she is an unbelievable writer. I really enjoy reading her because of the context and the way she writes. And as a former journalist, I can tell you it's fun to read her words. So we're going to talk to her, and I think that'll be a really good thing. So hang on for a second. We're going to come back with a little bit about the Ugata Regatta, as well as the ongoing, because there's still some boats out in the water, some about 100 miles left, some of the single-handle guys for the Trans-Superior, which runs every 2 years. And we're also waiting to find out who the Barthel Trophy champion is. If you're not familiar with that, there's a trophy given out by the Yachting Union of the Great Lakes, started in 1937, and they've run it off and on pretty much for every other year the last 20 years, but there were gaps in there, and they've had, this is the 29th, I think, or 30th race. 2 years ago, Bruce Aikens on his boat won, and Talisman, and then 4 years ago, a guy that's in this year's race, Guy Stauber on Papagacho, won the overall race. So we're going to find out who won that. Hopefully get an interview for the next show, but we want to bring you some backup and some information on just exactly what happened. We want to bring you what happened in Harbor Springs, as well as what is going on right now across Lake Superior and into Duluth. So we'll be back in a second.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
We didn't get a chance to go all the way up to Harbor Springs this year, but we wanted to get a chance to talk to you a little bit about the race, and wasn't as windy as they'd hoped for. I talked briefly to Debbie Shaneth, who runs the race up there, and they had, as always, an exemplary race committee and all the volunteers, but I just kind of wanted to go down through some of the winners and try to give you some pictures in that. So in the Aileron 28, our favorite skier, Stephen Kircher on Team Pine Point, won in the aileron class. John Hune, who's been on the show a number of times, including this year, was on Katana in the GL52 class. John was the winner there. And in the J111, Jeff Davis won in Shamrock. In the J70 class, Sean O'Brien, Little Traverse local guy, Little Traverse Yacht Club, won the J70 class. In the Melgus 32, Ian Hill skippered Stelia from the Hampton Yacht Club. In a very crowded ORA Class A, Dan Lewis's MC Squared, which is a Reichel Puke 50-50, was the winner of that race. And Blitzkrieg took the ORCB and a J122, and that's owned by, I believe, Matthew Schaefer. If I'm butchering some of these names, I appreciate, I apologize, but we're doing the best we can with that. In ORCC, and that's Warlock, owned by Tom Dixon on a J105, PHRIF. And a J109, Liquid Lounge 2, owned by Jim Caesar. And my favorite name, Sin Duda, owned by Lindsay Duda, won the PHRF B from the Chicago Yacht Club in a J88. So that'll take care of that. And just wanted to let you guys know that from the Trans-Superior race, from Catapult was the first across the line and actually ended up third, roughly 49 hours and 21 minutes. A little bit of a slow race this year. Valor, owned by Mark Hollenbach and Michael Kiss, came across second, but they were first overall in the handicap. And that was just mentioned a couple seconds ago, and Dan Yankee was third coming into that race. So we're going to give you a little bit more about the Trans-Superior race as we get a chance to talk to some of those guys. And hopefully we'll find out who won the Barthel Trophy, and we'll bring that to you as well. So that being the case, we will be back in a second with, we're going to start off with Wally, and then we'll have a little conversation with Phoebe Wall-Howard. I think you'll enjoy that.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye, Dad.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Have fun. Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
Alex is just
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Wally, we're going to have a conversation today about something up near and dear to my heart. I'm a lifelong coach. I've been fortunate enough to coach at the collegiate and high school level. And one of the things you understand as a coach is the brain is about 50% of the process. You can have all the equipment, you can have all the tools, you can have all the practice, but if the brain's not working, you've heard of shanks in golf, you've heard of slumps in baseball. All of those things are true because it isn't anything to do with any of the equipment being used. It's all about the head. Racers worry so much about their boats, and we have talked ad nauseum about making sure the bottoms are smooth and complete and the rest of it. But we've never really talked about what was the most important muscle of all, between the ears.
You got it.
And I think that's something with the races that we have. How many people are now thinking about what they did right, what they did wrong, and more importantly, what they didn't pre-plan between their ears? And that's where we're going to start today with pre-racing. And that's kind of a subject as we're on this wonderful, beautiful boat called Eagle One.
It is. Yeah, appreciate it, Greg. No, thanks for having me. We are on Eagle One, which is Tim Rivera's brand new Italia 14.98. This boat took 2 years to build with a lot of expectation, and you know it's fascinating because the goal for me and any program I'm with is to get everybody at a level of confidence, quite high confidence, because you know in sports if you're confident you're invincible. You can do anything. The basketball players, the rim's bigger, you know what I'm saying, baseball, confidence, but you can't just buy it and you can't just turn it on. You've got to earn it. And so with me in this particular boat, when it was brand new, when it came in, it had all the right parts and pieces, the sails, the electronics, all the sheets, the people and so forth. But it was clear to me that it wasn't connected, meaning I think the expectation was is because you bought all these parts and pieces that you just go out and win, hands down. But that wasn't the case. And so it took a lot of time for me and the crew to get together and believe that the idea of winning isn't necessarily because you want to win, but you have to have that inherent feeling that you deserve to win. And once you feel you deserve to win, you've got this expectation during the whole race that you deserve to be where you are, which is ultimately in first place.
All right, so let me ask you a question. Deserving to win has to have some factors to it. Is it confidence? Is it skill? Is it concentration? And I ask that question because one of the processes of you talk to anybody that's at the highest level of sport, when they're executing and sort of, you've heard the term, when they're in the zone, there's nothing in their brains. Right? It's all gone to all the practice that they've done. It's gone to their fingertips. They're not worrying about a left hand being stiff or a right arm doing this, that, or the other. Can a sailor afford to be able to do that like a baseball player? Because if you're in the zone, so to speak, and you don't think for a couple seconds, and it is just a natural kind of process, maybe the wind shifts. Are there factors in sailing that don't necessarily find themselves in other sports?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating because you're exactly right. When you are in this zone, when everything's working, it's kind of like the brain turns off, right? You're just there, experiencing the moment, and everything makes sense because you put the hard work in. So back to the hard work. Where does the hard work start? It starts with communication. You have to communicate with the crew, the team, beforehand, before you go out, after you come back in. A lot of communication, online, verbally, on and on, to nauseam, to the point I know this team here got sick of me over time because I would not stop trying to get their feedback, my feedback. How can we make it better? And I kept saying, particularly to Tim, I said, Tim, you did the hard work. You brought this beautiful boat. You brought this great team together, all this equipment, but that means nothing to me unless we get the feeling that we put the hard work in. So when you go to the race course, you absolutely have the confidence, undoubtedly, that you deserve to win. You deserve to be in that position. Now, again, you know as well as I do, some things happen right or wrong, and that's, you win or lose. But when you go out there with that expectation, you almost feel uncomfortable unless you are winning.
Is it communication to task or communication to pre-task? And I say that because is it making sure that you're on top of your game? The skipper obviously becomes the coach in this factor, just in terms of using semantics. The skipper becomes the guy who's obviously filtrating that conversation. But if you're communicating, is it making sure that we're absolutely trimming at the right time? Is it absolutely, it's not a matter of, hey, by the way, I had a beer last night with the wife. That's communicating, but in relation to the boat, it makes any sense. So does it start with the skipper, or is there somebody else in a crew this size, with this boat, who else communicates while you're racing?
Yeah, great question. So the whole process and the reason for the communication is first and foremost to line out a job description for everybody. Everybody's got a job. And then how does that job revolve around the whole boat? How does that communication revolve around the boat? So we've talked about this before. I like to have 3 groups of communication. A speed group that's always talking about how to make the boat faster, an information group that helps making decisions, and then that mechanical group that helps talk about raising and lowering sails, tacking, jibing, changing sails, and so on and so forth. This is a constant circle of communication where they all overlap, and you hear each group's communication, so they all make sense. But the most important thing through all this process is to get the confidence amongst the whole team together that there isn't these individuals on boat. Trust me, I have sailed on boats with a lot of individuals. Some of the pro teams I've sailed with and so forth, where the pros are out there just to protect their job, but not necessarily buy into the team as a group, as a friend. Whereas my whole goal is to make this team feel good about each other on the boat as well as off the boat.
Unrelated to what we're talking about, I'm curious. As a pro, you take any job that comes, or are you selective in the way you look at things? And that goes back to the communication of the crew.
Yeah.
If you're going to take a job with a crew that you can't, necessarily deal with, it makes the job harder.
Yeah, it sure does. And I'm fortunate to be at an age right now, Greg, where I can pick and choose the people I want to sail with. And I'm very fortunate this year to have sailed with a great group of people on a variety of different boats. Primarily because I get this feeling about the people. No, I do not want to sail on any other, every boat out there. I just don't, because even though all the boats are wonderful, it's the people that makes it for me. It's not the boat.
Okay. So as we're talking about pre-racing, and this is a term you've heard 100,000 times, time in the boat is critical, because you can communicate and you can have all the confidence in the world, but if you can't tack the boat, there has to be a melding of the act and the confidence to do that act, right? So time in the boat's really important, even in a pre-race process. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, for sure. And in coaching too, one of the biggest goals is how do you make time for practice, right? It's not as hard maybe in skiing because you're dealing with 1 or 2 people. But on a boat like this, you're dealing with 10, 12 people. Right. And it was a task for me to organize practices during the spring and early summer because everybody's so busy. Everybody's got a life, everybody's got a family, everybody's got a job. But they sacrifice that time to put the time into practice. Just simple things, like you said, tacking, jibing, changing sails, putting a reef in the mainsail. All these things that you could experience during a Mackinac race, or any race that is, yet you haven't practiced it, you're not going to be as confident. So we went through a variety of practices in this boat, as well as calibrating instruments, checking sails, changing sail shapes and stuff like that, so that when we did show up to Port Huron for the start of the first Mackinac race, there was that high level of confidence. So the pre-race work is where all the hard work's done before the racing starts.
Psychology, and we're going to end it with this one before we get into the racing conversation. But one of the conversations, if you watch YouTube and you watch the GL52 fleet, you watch the Super Series, Sail GP, those guys are on a boat. It's like this. It's almost like a courtroom. There's nobody screaming at somebody. It is very professional. I think we could learn from that in the amateur ranks, number one. But talk about why that calmness and why that process is so important in the comprehension of being able to master all that.
Yeah, again, it comes back to the practice, right? If you put enough time in the boat in a systematic way, where everything ultimately makes sense numerically as well as emotionally, you've got that calm, what I call calm confidence. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to get the adrenaline pumping in your body so high that that is going to change your mindset. Because one of my goals is to have the crew feel the same way if you're winning or if you're losing, so that you always have the mindset of just knowing how to take the next step and get a little bit better. So it revolves around practice, just good practice, not going out just sailing for fun, but practice as if you're racing.
Okay. So that's the homework.
Yep.
We're going to come back next week, and now we're going to talk a little bit. Next week, we're going to have a conversation about making the homework work and function with the actual race and how that works. So we'll be back with Wally next week, and we appreciate the time this week.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
At the U.S. Center for Safe Sport, ending abuse is not just our job, it's our promise.
Welcome back. We're talking with Phoebe Wall-Howard, one of the best sailing writers you'll ever get a chance to read. We're going to talk about a number of things, about your background. We're here at the Port Huron Yacht Club, and we're going to talk a little bit about sort of the increase in volume that you've come up with in writing on Substack. You were a former Free Press writer, now a columnist for the Detroit News. And first of all, thank you for taking the time. We're going to have a conversation about sailing and the media, but I really want to delve into, first question is really simple. On your Substack website, Elizabeth, your mother, is having holding your hand and starting. Is that where writing started for you?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
So my mother is a brilliant writer and believes in adventure and would say to me, I want you to do things that frighten you, because if you do things that frighten you, they won't frighten you anymore. So if that meant public speaking, if that meant writing about cars, if that meant figuring out sailing, figure out where your discomfort zone is and go there.
Okay. You have primarily, for the Free Press, written a lot about automobile business.
Yes.
Substack gives you a chance to kind of step away and be your sort of a freelance writer, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
Why sailing?
All sailing on Substack. Why sailing? Because I think it is the great misunderstood gem. I don't think people understand that regular people can love it as much as sailors. So it is sort of my mission to capture the excitement, the drama, and the people that I think are absolutely fascinating. I think people are intimidated by sailing, and I was intimidated by sailing. And this is something that's very hard for me. It doesn't come easy, but I think the stories are fantastic. And based on letters I get from around the country, there seems to be a connection.
When I read the title of Shifting Gears, which is your title for your Substack portion, I get it as a journalist. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation. We're going to talk journalist to journalist. I'm not sure we're not going to talk a whole lot about sailing, but I want to talk about the process of that. That being the case, Shifting Gears is such an apropos title. There's so many things, if you're a journalist, there are so many things that come across your desk in a given week, a given month, given year, that you do become a mini expert in a lot of places. And I think that's probably true with sailing.
Well, I hope so.
When I read your stories, there's insight because you've done your homework. You tell me things that I don't know. It's the inside of baseball, which to me, it's the Sports Illustrated as a kid. We all knew when we got Sports Illustrated that we knew all the scores. We didn't know the inside of baseball. That's kind of the way you write. When you approach a story, what is it that you're looking for?
I'm looking for something that you don't know. I'm trying to write for both sailors and non-sailors. One of the greatest compliments I received in recent days was a very accomplished sailor calling me and saying, I've known this competitor for years, but what your story told me is I've never really known him. And that's what I go for. So I don't care how much is known or covered. My job is to uncover things that teach you something about yourself and competition and the sport.
Where did journalism start for you?
It started in Detroit when I uncovered a scandal involving the Detroit Zoo. I was in high school, and I did a story for the high school newspaper that was then covered by the Free Press and the News and WDIV, and shut down the funding program for the Detroit Zoo because it was questionably I would say it was fraudulent. So what they were doing is they were asking suburbanite children to donate money to the zoo, adopt an animal, adopt a giraffe, a rhino, and what they found out is the city was putting all that money into the general fund. So the suburbanites were raising money for the animals and the city was taking it for the general fund. I wrote about this and it shut down the entire campaign so they could look at the money and the resources, and that was my senior year in high school.
So the hook was in early. Is it seeing the byline or is it telling the story?
It was telling the story.
Okay. Some of us got into it because we like to see our name in the byline. We can still tell the story. And there's nothing wrong with wanting the publicity, but that's also part of the gig.
I would say so.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia, a J school.
If you're not aware of the University of Missouri, it is probably one of the top 3 journalism schools in the country.
I would say it's probably the best.
Okay. As a Spartan, I'm not going to say that, but I'll tell you that. That's one of the reasons if you look at the Des Moines Register and you look at some of the Toledo Blade, the old days, you start talking about some of these papers that had these great backgrounds. And if you didn't understand the business, you didn't understand how good those papers were. But they were. And in Detroit, so out of Missouri, where's your first job?
My first job was at a tiny newspaper on the Louisiana-Arkansas border,
okay.
The El Dorado News-Times.
Right.
There were no bookstores, and there was a church on every corner, and the Episcopalians were evangelicals and spoke in tongue. So that gave you an idea of how religious the environment was. And I went from there to the Arkansas Gazette in Little Rock, and then the Des Moines Register. I covered politics, Bill Clinton when he was governor, and then president. Many of my years were covering politics, Democrats and Republicans.
Is there any correlation between politics and sailing?
I think sailing can be very political.
Okay. Especially at the Rules Committee when the race is over. I can completely understand that.
And as you know, we're monitoring some situations involving the Mackinac races now that there are some questions and lawyers are being brought in, and it's getting a little bit uncomfortable, I think.
Over a $3 flag, and I get it, it's bragging rights. I understand the premise, so we'll save that for another day. What's your introduction to sailing? John Enter, your husband, was the Commodore at Port Huron Yacht Club where we're sitting. And so I'm assuming that's probably the entry into sailing for you?
I would say when we were dating, I was watching him compete and I wanted to learn more about the boats he was on. But as a young girl, I competed with my father on Hobie Cats and we raced. We raced on the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair, but my whole background is Hobie racing.
Okay. I actually had a chance to sail with Hobie Alter once.
There you go.
And it turns out he's a Laguna Beach surfer. And when you meet your heroes, it's sometimes unfortunate because you realize that they're not always as representative as you hope they would be. Wonderful sailor, but it was
a brilliant sailor.
Unbelievable sailor, but never going to be a TV host. Let's put it that way. So, one of the things I want to talk about, and you obviously had a brilliant background. What I really wanted to talk to you about is when I read your writing, it is so clear and concise and informative. Again, inside baseball. It reminds me a little bit of Mark Mulvoy, who was, I think, the best sports writer who ever lived for Sports Illustrated. It has a very same lilt as you're reading it. And it's the economy of words. Is that something you've worked at? And then take me into the sailing and how that kind of works for you.
So I cover sailing because I'm trying to learn it myself.
Okay.
Every single story I write is trying to better understand the people and the actions. So I ask a lot about wind. I ask a lot about water. I ask a lot about sailors will use terminology with me that I think is very, very common. And I just said, I have to translate this for real people. And so they work with me. I would say, so that's the inspiration, is just trying to learn more myself. And anything that you would talk about at a party, that's the other test. So is there a topic that I see people talking about, wondering about, figuring out, and I think it would be interesting because nobody else knows it? That's another test. And so there's no story too small, and there's no story too big.
You've taken off on Substack in terms of the volume because the Free Press didn't do that as much as you're doing. This Mac, you've done, I think, 7 or 8 pieces, if I'm not mistaken?
19.
19, my mistake.
I've done 19 stories.
I don't think you did 19 when you were at the Free Press. Is that fair?
No, and I will tell you, the most incredible thing, when I first joined the Free Press, I was there for 7 years, and I went to the editors and said, I'd love to cover sailing. And my amazing editors said, we know from the data, we know our analytics, that people don't read sailing coverage.
Right.
We know that. And I said, let's see if we can try and approach it in a way that isn't a rundown of scores or outcomes.
Okay.
And they said, let's do it. And we knew the numbers were huge. When I left the Free Press, I didn't want to stop covering, and so now my Substack it's over 300,000 readers.
It's such
Sailing is a major driver. It's crazy.
It's also an interesting segue. We broke down, Dave Reed, who was the editor of Sailing World, conversation we had earlier this summer is if you take the top 4 sailors in the world and really bear down on their social network numbers, they're not what you think they are. Yet they're demanding the same as maybe Tiger Woods, and they've got 100,000 followers where other athletes have millions of people. It talked to Doug DeVos. Well, we had all these hits, but that doesn't translate necessarily into following. It's a different animal. So here's my point. Our little show has kind of taken off. We've had some fairly, substantial stars of sailing on the show. I'm a guy in the middle of nowhere with a camera, and you're a writer. My argument is, and I don't think it's a matter of not following readers. I really believe that the sport deserves better, but I'm not sure the people that are involved in the sport are paying as much attention as they might. And part of that is because they're out sailing, but I think the sailing media could do a better job of covering the sport if the people would have a two-way highway. Is that a fair premise?
I think there's a lot of opportunity.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of opportunity. Yeah, I think it's just great stories. I don't know. I mean, here's the other thing. When you have corporate sponsors, and sailing depends on corporate sponsors, corporate sponsors want people engaged. I mean, they want people to follow golf. They want people to follow baseball and football. Sailing is as high action, as interesting, as compelling. So yeah, the idea that you would dismiss it as just a tiny little sport, it's not. I think it appeals to everybody, including those who participate.
Could yacht clubs, and especially in the Great Lakes, could they do a better job? I look at somebody like Laura Moom or Sarah Rands in Chicago. They have 2 professionals there that you can make a phone call. Around here, go to Cleveland, go to Detroit, go to other places. It's hard. We are kind of the majority of what is sailing media at the moment. And so my point is, I think if people were listening to this, I believe that yacht clubs could have a better conversation within their flag to how to better support the premise. Yes, it's great for the Port Huron Yacht Club to have a boat night, but there's so much else that happens between April and October that I think it's lost. Is that a fair criticism, and is it a fair criticism to say that they could pay attention a little bit better?
The question is, do you have a media audience? I think your point is you would. We know in Chicago there is.
Yeah.
We know that TV is hugely interested, and they covered incredible stories, and they're all over the Chicago race. The question is, in Detroit, is that interest there? I think it could be. I think you've got great video, great stories, great words. I talked this morning to Tanda Gamiter, and she's at M Live. She did 2 stories on this, at least 2. And people loved that she did that for M Live. Not known for sailing coverage. And again, let me Tanda Gamiter, because I know it is writing, but when you have something not known for sailing that gets a great audience, that gets great reaction, and she's the one who's putting herself out there to push it. So to me, it's about the individual journalist. Like, there's opportunity. Do you want to do it? Do they have time? I don't know.
As a newcomer to the sport, I've sailed my whole life, but certainly a newcomer to racing at the levels that we're covering. We've covered America's Cup, we've covered the Olympics, we've certainly covered the Sail GP and those kinds of things. When I talk to somebody, again, I'll use Dave Reed as the example, he points out that he's the last sort of full-time journalist covering sail racing, in this country. And I'm not sure he's not right. I think he is right. And I know there's an audience, and part of our job is to find that audience, but part of that job is also to wake up those who might not realize there is an audience. And that's kind of the point of this interview, because I think they could do a better job, not because I make no money at this. We're doing this out of the labor of love for the sport. And we are getting to those folks. So it's not like you can't get there. And so to me, being able to talk to a world-class Olympic gold medalist and then somebody who wins the MAC as a cruiser on the shoreline course, I think they both have the same passion for the sport.
Well, here's where I think you have a situation that people aren't thinking about. When I write stories about boats and families, they call me and they say, this is what we're saving for our children and grandchildren. you are writing our life. You are recording something. You are making history. So they can talk about it and they can show a flag. But when you write the stories, and they're stories people can keep like journals and diaries, but these stories are forever, and everyone remembers. I mean, it changes your legacy. It changes history, and that's where I think it's really impactful. And it is, and the families are really touched. They don't know it till they're in it,
Right.
but when they're in it, it's very powerful and beautiful.
I'd say a lot of that too, because part of it is if you look at the Olympic numbers from Barcelona last year, on the West Coast, at least on 2 days, they shut it down because regional pickleball championship was drawing more people than an America's Cup championship because there was nobody on board the American boat. It was a lot of them were American, which they're kind of working towards changing. I'm not criticizing the sport in any way. I think it's a unique sport because every other sport, by the time you're 18 or 21, and that's high school and college graduation, lots of guys going to coaching. We take 2 weeks off for sailing so kids can not worry, so they can go sail the Mackinac races, and we shut down our junior sailing program. It's a different model. And so as I'm the neophyte coming into this, I just think there's such a glorious sport, and there's just so much out there, and you're chasing it. I just think maybe this conversation, if I'm a vice commodore at XYZ Club, maybe they take 5 seconds out to send 3 story ideas that might be interesting.
Well, also, I think that you have this idea that all sailors are super rich, pampered yachtsmen.
I know that's not true.
And that's not true.
One of them.
And frankly, you do have rich yachtsmen today who weren't rich when they were little, or they didn't start out that way. But you have really beautiful stories about lessons learned. A number of people have said to me, if I've learned anything from sailing, these are all life lessons. Every day on the water is a life lesson. It's about being relentless. It's about being fearless. It's about having courage. It's about helping people who are in trouble. And so that's the idea, is connecting and sort of setting aside some of the preconceived ideas. I think they're wrong. I actually think they're wrong.
I was on a $1.3 million boat earlier, Eagle 1, talking while I crossed. That'll be on it later in the show. I realized that his reel cover cost more than my boat. So, but the passion of that is, I have a $7,000 or $8,000, $9,000 boat, a 30-foot boat, but I've spent $40,000 bringing it up to nothing. There's nobody it has an economic brain that would do that. So I understand the passion of the sport we've done in our lives, and I think that's the important part.
Well, but you also, how many people do you have who are crew who will never own a boat, and they'll be phenomenal crewmates? That's what I love, finding those people.
Right.
Or people who are kids who think, I'm never going to do this, and it changes their life trajectory, like the aerospace engineer I told you about, right? He's sitting out on a boat, he's racing as a kid, he's looking at the clouds and distracted, and he ends up in aerospace study and just finished at the University of Michigan. So it is because of sailing that sends these kids. That one will not own a boat, but he will crew forever. And those are the people, I think sometimes I tell people, just go be crew.
Yeah.
You're hardworking, you have energy, do it.
I honestly believe there's more passion. I'm involved in a number of sports, but I think there's more passion in this sport. And I think it's because it's a lifelong pursuit. You can be a champion at 7, you can be a champion at 70 on the same boat and never take a day off and go through college and all the way through your normal adult. And I think that changes the parameters of it. And sometimes when you're in it, it's hard to see it because you're in it. You don't know what the outside might bring. And honestly, if you talk to a lot of sailors, they're very rarely involved in other sports because even in winter, they make winter sailing. If they don't go to Florida, they're still part of it. So I think that changes the landscape. And I'm not sure sometimes you can see it, and I'm saying that sort of from the outside in.
And also starting late, right? You have people who go from motorboats to sailboats at 40. I mean, there are not a lot of sports you can start at 40 and do well and compete.
No, and it's also one of those sports, if you have money, you can buy your way into the sport at a high level. You can buy a boat, buy a crew, and learn to stand in the back of the boat drinking Coke. I get that part. You can't do that in baseball and golf and some of the other sports because you can't rent a golfer, you can't rent a catcher. And I get that part. From a writing perspective, I want to talk technical parts of it. Does it come quickly after you interview somebody, or is it something you work at? Is it polish? Give me the mechanics of a story for you.
So in a crisis story, so the stories where I cover boats sinking, rescues, those are immediate. So I do the interviews, and I do in-person interviews, I do all the phone calls, and I immediately sit down and write it as quickly as possible and get it up as quickly as possible. The other stories, like profiles, where I'm profiling a navigator, a driver, a bowman, those I'm sort of reflecting on maybe for a day or two and trying to figure out the best lead threads that are going to capture people, and importantly, telling people stuff they don't already know. And that's an idea that my husband said to me, people don't understand what these jobs are. I don't think people have any idea what a bowman does or a driver, how they're doing it and how their brain works. And what was fascinating, I did a 3-part series on that, and the number of career sailors who said, I've never thought of it this way, I've never, or shouting, never won a race. Like one of the guys said, that's a terrible strategy. You yell at people all the time, you crush them, and they're not going to speak up and speak out.
In my experience at the high levels, it's nominal conversation. There's never yelling and screaming. That seems to come with people who think they're sail racers. We just bought the headphones for my wife and I for the front and the back of the boat, which turns out to be, I think it's a wedding saver, or at least a marriage saver, because you can't yell real loud into it because it'll reverberate back in your ear. Generally speaking, my opinion is that the guys that yell generally aren't very good at it. That's usually what happens, and I get that part. The leads come easier for you when you're interviewing somebody. Is it something we're in the business of deadlines. I get that. And now you have to add the fake news on things. That goes with part of the premise, right? It's not something that we necessarily have to deal with. But do you find your way through pretty easily when you're interviewing somebody to find that lead sentence?
Yes.
Okay.
And I do enough reporting before the interview that I know where I want to take it and kind of how I want to structure things. So I do a lot of advanced reporting before I sit down with sources to make sure I have a story. Right.
And you do a lot of back checking to make sure that the accuracy of that story and that information. But let's use one as an example. And I think we both can agree on this. Weather information comes from one place. It's a big used ball out in White Lake. Every application, every this, that, or the other comes from one place. Yet, if you listen to a pre-brief on a race from here, let's say, everybody's got their own. One of your stories was the guy was building models, 10, 12. That's a fine hobby. But he's still getting the information from one place, right? So the question, and we asked this all across later in the show, is weather a guesstimate or is it accurate science? Well, if we've got 12 reports, because on my phone there might be 2 different applications, and I can look at both of them, the same information comes from the same place, and both those applications have different results. So it is a guesstimate. And so part of that information and dissecting that information is making sure those who are reading and listening get the right information. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I also think they filter it based on the boat they're racing too, a little bit, right?
Right.
I think they're filtering the weather, but they know the team, they know their strengths, they know which sails. I think that is something I've learned a lot is choosing your sails and choosing what to leave on the dial. Like where, I was talking to Chuck Storms, and here he's won back-to-back Max. He won Bayview and he just won Chicago on Detour. Not atypical for him. But he's got to decide which sails. He was talking about all the sails he has to choose from based on weather reports. And the idea that you could take, you could bring the wrong sails or leave something behind that could have been so much better. I mean, that's a kind of interpretation of weather I hadn't considered, and a skill that I think some people forget.
Reading your prose, I would suggest that you are obsessed and not a vocation. You do it so well. It's more than a job to you. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
That's hard to explain unless you're talking to somebody else who is as infected with that process, right?
So I will tell you, when my husband was off racing, I was sleeping 3 hours a night because I was reporting around the clock. So I was reporting 21 hours a day when we had sinking, when we had mass break, when we had all these different things. But I just wouldn't stop. I had people texting me at 10, 11, 12 midnight with tips, and I'd get up and I'd just be like, forget it, I'm going to work through the night. So this is the stuff that I love. And you couldn't pay me enough. I mean, I just love doing it.
Fair to say that was the way when you got your first story when you're still covering the Detroit Zoo? That's not something that changes because you grew into it. It's something I'm guessing you had when you did your original Detroit Zoo story.
Yeah.
It's a personality trait.
Well, it was interesting. I actually had an argument with a sailor that I was coming off some reporting the day of the Bayview launch and all that storm and everything was hit and boats were damaged. And this sailor said to me, he wanted me to tell him all that had happened. And I said, I'm going home to write. I'm going home to write and I'm going to file a story now. And I'm sorry, but I don't want to sit and talk with you. I want to write for my readers. And he was really offended by that. And I love writing for readers. Those are sailors, they're families, that's the most important thing to me.
Do you have to write?
I do.
Okay. It's a drug.
Well, I'm married to someone who's okay with me writing at midnight and 1 in the morning. I set the alarm for 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. I have a phone under my pillow. So, and you have to understand those people. Yeah.
I say that. I wrote a daily column for 20 years. I still have to sit down once in a while and formulate something on Facebook and write 1,000 words on something. And it's only for me. Just if nobody reads it, that's fine. I may get rid of it. But it's just that exercise of process that, again, I don't drink and I don't smoke, so maybe this is the drug. And I say that because there's nothing worse than two writers having a conversation, because the rest of the world disappears, right? Because it's nothing about the sport or the activity. It's about the process of what we do for a living, and that goes back to the vocational aspect versus being completely in love with it. And I guess it's that. Last question: what is it you love about writing, and what is it you love about writing related to sailing?
What I love about writing is that it teaches me. I try to teach people things about ourselves. So if I'm done with a story, I want to have laughed or cried. It's not unusual when I've done interviews, even many of the sailors, that have moved me to tears, or their families. So it's something that touches your soul. And the reason I do what I do, and it's important, is because if you spend time with my words, you're a busy person and you have 50,000 other more important things to do. So if you spend time with something I've written, it needs to touch your life or change your life. It needs to change how you look at this world. And the reason I do sailing is I think it changes how we look at the world.
Well, if you get a chance to read Phoebe, do, because again, I'm a fan, and that it's just an amazing opportunity to read your concepts. And I also believe that writers, somebody touched them with a different view of whatever. If everybody walks in the same room, you're coming out with whatever it is. There may be 99 people in the room. You're going to be the one guy coming out with a different angle. And I think that's God, swear to God, it's God given. You just look at things differently, right? I think that's part of the premise. But appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And if you get a chance to read on Substack, get on that as quick as possible, because again, you're not going to find a better writer in the area. So thank you for your time. And I want to thank all of our guests, Phoebe and Wally, and all the folks that ran in the Ugata Regatta, as well as the great winners in the Trans-Spirit, which was a little bit slow this year, but certainly a terrific race. As we finish this show, there's still about 7 or 8 boats left out in the lake, and hopefully they'll be in before the Thursday party. Get a chance to cover that. We'll find out who the Bartel winner was, and we'll get an interview with him, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to Joe Roaming from Catapult. It'd be interesting to talk to him a little bit about it. I know Valor won the race, but to me, the guy that's crossed first is the guy that wins. But I get handicapped, so don't get mad at that process. Anyway, we appreciate everybody watching. We're going to be at the Tartan 10 Nationals next week and follow them around for a week, and it'll be a fun opportunity. And there's still some races left to go. We want to be able to get on our boat a little bit more, but as this fall sports schedule starts, off we go. And anyway, the guys that ran a Trans-Spirit, Ugata Regatta, thanks for all that, and we'll see you next week.